Hi, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. These are the last two chapters of this wonderful novel we've been reading together, A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. This is book 5, chapters 40 and 41. We've come a long way. Ready? Let me just adjust this a little bit. Chapter 40. We had a fine life. We lived through the months of January and February, and the winter was very fine, and we were very happy. There had been short thaws when the wind blew warm and the snow softened and the air felt like spring, but always the clear, hard cold had come again and the winter had returned. In March came the first break in winter. In the night, it started raining. Remember what rain means, ladies and gentlemen. It rained on all morning and turned the snow to slush and made the mountainside dismal. There were clouds over the lake and over the valley. It was raining high in the mountain, up the mountain, pardon me. Catherine wore heavy overshoes, and I wore Mr. Gutenger's rubber boots. And we walked to the station under the umbrella through the slush and the running water that was washing the ice on the roads bare to stop at the pub before lunch for a vermouth. Outside, we could hear the rain. Do you think we ought to move into town? I asked. What do you think? Catherine asked. If the winter is over and the rain keeps up and it won't be fun up here, how long is it before young Catherine? About a month, she said, perhaps a little more. We might go down and stay in Montreux. Why don't we go to Lucerne? That's where the hospital is. All right, but I thought maybe that was too big of a town. We can be as much alone in a bigger town as Lucerne might be nice. When should we go? Oh, I don't care. Whenever you want, darling. I don't want to leave here if you don't want. Let's see how the weather turns out. It rained for 3 days. The snow was all gone now on the mountainside below the station. The road was a torrent of muddy snow water. It was too wet and slushy to go out, and on the morning of the third day of the rain, we decided to go into town. That is all right, Mr. Henry, Guttinger said. You don't have to give me any notice. I didn't think that you would want to stay now that the bad weather has come. We have to be near the hospital anyway on account of Madame, I said. Oh, I understand, he said. Will you come back sometime and stay with the little one? Yes, I said, if you would have room. In the spring, when it is nice, you can come and enjoy it. We could put the little one and the nurse in the big room that is closed now, and you and Madame could have the same room looking out over the lake. I'll write about coming, I said. We packed and left on the train, and that went down after lunch. Mr. and Mrs. Guttinger came down to the station with us, and he hauled our baggage down on the sled through the slush. They stood beside the station in the rain, waving goodbye. They were very sweet, Catherine said. They were fine to us, I said. We took the train to Lucerne from Montreux, and looking out the window toward where we had lived, you could not see the mountains for the clouds. The train stopped in Vevey and then went on, passing the lake on one side and on the other the wet brown fields and the brown woods and the wet houses. We came into Lausanne and went into a medium-sized hotel to stay. It was still raining, and we drove through the streets and into the carriage entrance of the hotel. The concierge, with the brass keys on his lapels, the elevator, the carpets on the floor, and the white wash bowls with shining fixtures, the brass bed, and the big, comfortable bedroom, they all seemed a very great luxury after the Guttingers. The windows of the room looked out onto the wet garden with the wall topped by the iron fence. Across the street, which sloped steeply, was another hotel with a similar wall and a garden. I looked out at the rain falling in the fountain of the garden. Catherine turned on all the lights, commenced unpacking. I ordered a whiskey and a soda, and I lay on the bed and read the papers. I I'm pointing to that because who's pregnant here? I had thought I had bought at the station. He bought these papers at the station, and it was March 1918, and the German offensive has started in France. I drank the whiskey and soda, and I read while Catherine unpacked and moved around the room. You know what I have to get, darling? She said. What? I said. Baby clothes. There aren't many people that reach my time without baby things. Well, you can buy them, I said. Well, I know. That's what I'll do tomorrow. I'll find out what is necessary. You ought to know. You were a nurse, I said. But so few of the soldiers had babies in the hospital. I did, I said. The narrator says. She hit me with the pillow and spilled the whiskey and soda. I'll order you another, she said. I'm sorry I spilled it. Oh, there wasn't much left. Come on over to the bed. No, she said. I have to try and make this room look like something. Like what? I asked. Well, like our home. Hang out the Allied flags, I said. Oh, shut up, she said. Say it again. Shut up. You say it so cautiously, I said, as though you didn't want to offend anyone. Well, I don't, she said. Well, then come over to the bed. All right, she said. She came and sat on the bed. I know I'm no fun for you, darling. I'm like a big flour barrel. No, you're not, I said. You're beautiful and you're sweet. I'm just something very ungainly that you've married. No, you're not, I said. You're more beautiful all the time. But I'll be thin again, darling, she said. Well, you're thin now. You've been drinking, she said. Just the whiskey and soda. There's another coming, she said. And then we should order dinner up here? That'll be good, I said. And then we won't go out, will we? We'll just stay in tonight. And we'll play, I said. And drink some wine, Catherine said. It won't hurt me. Maybe we can get some of our old white Capri. I know we can, I said. They'll have Italian wines at the hotel this size. The waiter knocked at the door and he brought the whiskey in with a glass of ice and beside the table in a tray and a small bottle of soda. Thank you, I said. Put it down there. Will you please have dinner for two brought up here and two bottles of dry white Capri and ice? Do you wish to commence your dinner with soup? Do you want soup, Cat? Please, she said. Bring soup for one. Thank you, sir. He went out and shut the door. I went back to the papers and the war and the papers and poured the soda slowly over the ice into the whiskey. I would have to tell them not to put ice in the whiskey. Let them bring the ice separately. That way you could tell how much whiskey there was and it would not suddenly be too thin from the soda. I would get a bottle of whiskey and have them bring ice and soda. That's the sensible way. Good whiskey was very pleasant. It was one of the pleasant parts of life. What are you thinking, darling? About whiskey, I said. Well, what about whiskey? About how nice it is. Catherine made a face. All right, she said. We stayed at the hotel 3 weeks. It wasn't bad. The dining room was usually empty, and we ate in our room at night. We walked into town and took the cogwheel railway to Ouchy and walked beside the lake. The weather became quite warm. The weather became quite warm, and it was like spring. We wished we were back in the mountains, but the spring weather lasted only a few days, and then the cold rawness of the breaking up of winter came again. Catherine bought the things she needed for the baby up in the town. I went to the gymnasium in the arcade to box for exercise. I usually went up there in the morning while Catherine stayed late in bed. On the days of fall spring, it was very nice, after boxing and taking a shower, to walk along the streets, smelling the spring in the air, and stop at a cafe to sit and watch the people and read the paper and drink vermouth. What a life, huh? But then go down to the hotel and have lunch with Catherine. The professor at the boxing gymnasium wore mustaches and was very precise and jerky and went all to pieces if you started after him. but it was pleasant in the gym. There was good air and light, and I worked quite hard, skipping rope, shadow boxing, doing abdominal exercises lying on the floor in a patch of sunlight that came through the open window, and occasionally scaring the professor when we boxed. I could not shadow box in front of the narrow, long mirror at first because it looked so strange to see a man with a beard boxing. But finally, I just thought it was funny. I started to take off the beard as soon as I started boxing, but Catherine didn't want me to. Sometimes Catherine and I went for rides out in the country in a carriage. It was nice to ride when the days were pleasant, and we found two good places where we could ride out and eat. Catherine couldn't walk very far now, and I loved to ride out along the country roads with her. When there was a good day, we had a splendid time, and we never had a bad time. We knew that the baby was very close now, and it gave us both a feeling as though something were hurrying us, and we could not lose any time together. Chapter 41. One morning, I woke up about 3 o'clock hearing Catherine stirring in the bed. Are you all right, Cat? I've been having some pains, darling. Regularly? Not very. Well, if you have them regularly, we're going to go to the hospital. I was very sleepy, so I went back to sleep, and a little while later, I woke up again. Maybe you better call up the doctor, Catherine said. I think maybe this is it. I went to the phone and called the doctor. How often are the pains coming? He asked. How often are they coming, Cat? I should think every quarter of an hour, she said. You should go to the hospital then, the doctor said. I will dress and go there away myself. I hung up and called the garage near the station to send up a taxi. No one answered the phone for a long time. And then I finally got a man who promised to send the taxi at once. Catherine was dressing. Her bag was all packed with the things that she would need at the hospital and the baby things. Outside in the hall, I rang for the elevator. There was no answer. I went downstairs. There was no one downstairs except the night watchman. I brought the elevator up myself, put Catherine's bag in it. She stepped in and we went down. The night watchman opened the door for us and we sat outside on the stone slabs beside the stairs down to the driveway and we waited for the taxi. The night was clear and the stars were out. Catherine was very excited. I'm so glad it started, she said. Now in a little while, it'll be all over. You're a good, brave girl, I said. I'm not afraid, she said, but I wish the taxi would come, though. We heard it coming up the street and we saw the headlights. It turned into the driveway and I helped Catherine in and the driver put the bag in the front. Drive to the hospital, I said. We went out of the driveway and started up the hill. At the hospital, we went in and I carried the bag. Isn't that nice of him? There was a woman at the desk who wrote down Catherine's name, age, address, relatives, and religion in a book. And she said that she had no religion, and the woman drew a line in the space after the word. She gave her name as Frederic Henry. I will take you up to your room, she said. We went up in an elevator. The woman stopped it, and we stepped out and followed her down the hall. And Catherine held tight to my arm. This is the room, the woman said. Will you please undress and get into bed? Here's a nightgown for you to wear. I have a nightgown, Catherine said. It's better for you to wear this nightgown, the woman said. I went outside and sat in the chair in the hallway. You can come in now, the woman said from the doorway. Catherine was lying in the narrow bed wearing a plain square-cut nightgown that looked as though it were made of rough sheeting. She smiled at me. I'm having fine pains now, she said. The woman was holding her wrist and timing the pains with a watch. That was a big one, Catherine said. I saw it on her face. Where's the doctor? I asked the woman. Well, he's lying down sleeping, she said. He'll be here when he's needed. I must do something for Madame now, the nurse said. Would you please step out again? I went out into the hall. It was a bare hall with two windows, closed doors all along the corridor. It smelled of hospital. I sat on the chair and looked at the floor and prayed for Catherine. This is interesting, isn't it? Because he doesn't really believe, but he's praying. You can come in, the nurse said. I went in. Hello, darling, Catherine said. How is it? I said. They're coming quite often now, and her face drew up, and then she smiled. That was a real one. Do you want to put your hand on my back again, nurse? If it helps you, the nurse said. You go away, darling, Catherine said. Go out and get something to eat. I may do this for a long time, the nurse says. The first labor is usually protracted, the nurse said. Please go out and get something to eat, Catherine said. I'm really fine. I'll stay a while, I said. The pains came quite regularly, and then they slacked off. Catherine was very excited. When the pains were bad, she called them good ones, and when they started to fall off, she was disappointed and ashamed. You go out, darling, she said. I think you are just making me self-conscious. Her face tied up. There, that was better. I so want to be a good wife and have this child without any foolishness, she said. Please go, get some breakfast, darling, and then come back. I won't miss you. Nurse is splendid to me. You have plenty of time for breakfast, the nurse said. I'll go then. Goodbye, sweet, I said. Goodbye, Catherine said, and have a fine breakfast for me, too. Where can I get breakfast? I asked the nurse. There's a cafe down the street at the square, she said. It should be open now. Outside, it was getting light, and I walked down the empty street to the cafe. There was a light in the window, and I went in and stood at the zinc bar, and an old man served me a glass of white wine and a brochet. The brochet was yesterday's, and I dipped it in the wine and then drank a glass of coffee. What do you do at this hour? The old man asked. My wife is in labor at the hospital, I said. So, I wish you good luck. Give me another glass of wine, I said. He poured it in the bottle, slopping it over a little, so some ran down on the zinc. I drank this glass, paid, and went out. Outside along the street were the refuse cans from the houses waiting for the collector. A dog was nosing at one of the cans. What do you want? I asked, and I looked in the can to see if there was anything I could pull out for him, but there was nothing on top but coffee grounds, dust, and some dead flowers. Nothing on top but coffee grounds, dust, and dead flowers. There isn't anything, dog, I said. The dog crossed the street. I went up the stairs into the hospital to the floor Catherine was on, and down the hall to her room, and I knocked on the door. There was no answer. I opened the door, and the room was empty except for Catherine's bag on the chair and her dressing gown hanging on a hook on the wall. I went out and down the hall looking for somebody, and I found the nurse. Where's Madame Henry? I asked. A lady has just gone to the delivery room, she said. Where is it? I'll show you, she said. She took me down to the end of the hall. The door of the room was partly open, and I could see Catherine lying on the table, covered by a sheet. The nurse was on one side, and the doctor stood on the other side of the table beside some cylinders. The doctor held a rubber mask attached to a tube in one hand. I will give you a gown and you can go in, the nurse said. Come in here, please. She put a white gown on me and pinned it at the neck and back with a safety pin. You can go in, she said. I went into the room. Hello, darling, Catherine said in a strained voice. I'm not doing much. You're Mr. Henry? The doctor asked. Yes. How's everything, doctor? Things are going very well, the doctor said. We came in here where it is easy to give gas for the pains. I want it now, Catherine said. The doctor placed the rubber mask over her face, turned the dial, and I watched Catherine breathing heavily, deeply, and rapidly. Then she pushed the mask away. The doctor shut off the petcock. That wasn't a very big one. I had a very big one a while ago. The doctor made me clear out, didn't you, doctor? Her voice was strange. It rose on the word doctor. The doctor smiled. I want it again, Catherine said. She held the rubber tight to her face and breathed fast. I heard her moaning a little, and then she pulled the mask away and she smiled. That was a big one, she said. That was a very big one. Don't you worry, darling. You go away. Go have another breakfast. I'll stay, I said. We had gone to the hospital about 3 o'clock in the morning, and at noon, Catherine was still in the delivery room. The pains had slackened again, and she looked very tired and worn now, but she was still cheerful. I'm not any good, darling, she said. I'm so sorry. I I thought I would do it very easily. Now there's one. She reached out her hand for the mask and she held it over her face, and the doctor moved the dial and watched her. And in a little while it was over. It wasn't much, Catherine said. She smiled. I'm a fool about the gas. It's wonderful. We'll get some for the home, I said. There, there one comes, Catherine said quickly. The doctor turned the dial and looked at his watch. What's the interval now? I asked. About a minute, he said. Do you want lunch? I will have something pretty soon, he said. You must have something to eat, Doctor, Catherine said. I'm sorry I'm on so long. I go so long. Couldn't my husband give me gas? If you wish, the doctor said. Here, you turn it to the numeral 2. I see, I said. And there was a marker on the dial that turned with the handle. I want it now, Catherine said, and she held the mask tight to her face. I turned the dial to number 2, and when Catherine put down the mask, I turned it off. It was very good of the doctor to let me do something. Did you do it, darling? Catherine asked. She stroked my wrist. Sure. Did you do it, darling? So she doesn't know if he did it or not. Did you do it? Did you do it? Sure. You're so lovely. She was drunk from the gas. She was a little drunk from the gas. I will eat from a tray in the next room, the doctor said, and you can call me at any moment. While the time passed, I watched him eat. And then after a while, I saw that he was lying down and smoking a cigarette. Catherine was getting very tired. Do you think I'll ever have this baby? She asked. Of course you will. Yes, I said. I'll try as hard as I can. I push down, but it goes away. There it comes. Give it to me. At 2 o'clock, I went out and had lunch. So she's been in labor now, what, almost 12 hours. There were a few men in the cafe sitting with coffee and glasses of Kirsch and Mark on the tables. I sat down at a table. Can I eat? I asked the waiter. It's past time for lunch, he said. Is there anything for all hours? Well, you can have a crochet. Give me a crochet and a beer. A demi or a bock? A light demi, I said. The waiter brought a dish of sauerkraut with a slice of ham over the top and a sausage buried in the hot wine-soaked cabbage. I ate it, and I drank the beer. I was very hungry. I watched the people at the tables in the cafe, and one table they were playing cards. 2 men at a table next to me were talking and smoking, and the cafe was full of smoke. The zinc bar where I had breakfast had 3 people behind it now. The old man, a plump woman in a black dress who sat behind the counter and kept track of everything served to the tables, and a boy in an apron. And I wondered how many children the woman had had and what it had been like. When I was through with the crochet, I went back to the hospital. The street was all clean now. There were no refuse cans out. The day was cloudy, but the sun was trying to come through. I rode upstairs in the elevator, stepped out, and went down to the hall to Catherine's room, where I had left my white gown. I put it on, pinned it in back of the neck. I looked into the glass, and I saw myself looking like a fake doctor with a beard. I went down the hall to the delivery room. The door was closed, and I knocked. No one answered. So I turned the handle, and I went in. The doctor sat by Catherine, and the nurse was doing something at the other end of the room. Here's your husband, the doctor said. Oh, darling, I have the most wonderful doctor, Catherine said in a very strange voice. He's been telling me the most wonderful story. And when the pain came too badly, he put me all the way out. He's wonderful. You are wonderful, doctor. You're drunk, I said. I know it, Catherine said, but you shouldn't say it. Then give it to me. Give it to me. She clutched hold of the mask and breathed short, deep, pantingly, making the respirator click. And then she gave a long sigh, and the doctor reached with his left hand and lifted the mask. That was a very big one, Catherine said, and her voice was very strange. I'm not going to die now, darling. I'm past where I'm going to die. Aren't you glad? Don't you get in that place again, I said. I won't, she said. I'm not afraid of it, though. I won't die, darling. You will not do any such foolishness, the doctor said. You would not die and leave your husband. Oh, no, I won't die. I wouldn't die. It's silly to die. There it comes. Give it to me. After a while, the doctor said, You will go out, Mr. Henry, for a few moments, and I will make an examination. He wants to see how I'm doing, Catherine said. You can come back afterward, darling, can't he, doctor? Yes, said the doctor. I will send word when he can come back. I went out the door and down the hall to the room where Catherine was to be after the baby came, and I sat in the chair there and I looked at the room. I had the paper in my coat that I had brought when I went out for lunch, and I read it. It was beginning to be dark outside, and I turned the light on to read. After a while, I stopped reading and turned off the light, and I watched it get dark outside. I wondered why the doctor did not send for me. Maybe it was better I was away. He probably wanted me away for a while. So I looked at my watch. If he did not send for me in 10 minutes, I would go down anyway. Poor, poor dear cat. And this was the price you paid for sleeping together. This was the end of the trap. This was what people got for loving each other. Thank God for gas anyway. What must it have been like before there were any anesthetics? Once it started, they were in the mill race. Catherine had a good time in the time of pregnancy. It wasn't bad. She was hardly ever sick. She wasn't awfully uncomfortable until toward the last. But now they got her in the end. You never got away with anything. Get away, hell, it would have been the same if we had been married 50 times. And what if she should die? She won't die. People don't die in childbirth nowadays. That was what all husbands thought. Yes, but what if she should die? No, she won't die. She was just having a bad time. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is the stream of consciousness technique that he's using. She's only having a bad time. The initial labor is always protracted. She's only having a bad time. Afterward, we'd say, what a bad time. And Catherine would say, it wasn't really so bad. But what if she should die? No, she can't die. Yes, but what if she should die? She can't, I tell you. Don't be a fool. It's just a bad time. It's just nature giving her hell. It's only the first labor, which is almost always protracted. Yes, but what if she should die? She can't die. Why would she die? What reason is there for her to die? There's just a child that has to be born, the byproduct of good nights in Milan. It makes trouble, is born, and then you look after it, and then you get fond of it, maybe. But what if she should die? She won't die. But what if she should die? She won't. She's all right. But what if she should die? She can't die. But what if she should die? Hey, what about that? What if she should die? The doctor came into the room. How does it go, doctor? It doesn't go, he said. What do you mean? Just that. I made an examination, and he detailed the result of the examination. Since then, I've waited to see, but it doesn't go. Well, what do you advise? I asked. There are two things. Either high forceps delivery, which can tear and be quite dangerous, besides being possibly bad for the child, or a cesarean. What's the danger of a cesarean? What if she should die? It should be no greater than the danger of an ordinary delivery, he said. Would you do it yourself? I asked. Yes, I would possibly need an hour to get things ready and to get the people I would need, perhaps a little less. What do you think? I asked. I would advise a cesarean operation. If it were my wife, I would do a cesarean. What are the after effects? I asked. Well, there are none. There's only the scar. What about infection? I asked. The danger is not so great as in a high forceps delivery, he said. What if you just went on and did nothing? I asked. You'd have to do something eventually. Mrs. Henry is already losing much of her strength. The sooner we operate, the safer. Operate as soon as you can, I said. I will go and give instructions. I went into the delivery room, and the nurse was with Catherine, who lay on the table, big under the sheet, looking very pale and tired. Did you tell him he could do it? She asked. Yes, I said. Isn't that grand? Now it'll all be over in an hour. I'm almost done, darling. I'm going all to pieces. Please give me that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Breathe deeply. I am. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. Get another cylinder, I said to the nurse. This is a new cylinder, she said. I'm just a fool, darling, Catherine said. But it doesn't work anymore. She began to cry. Oh, I wanted to have this baby and not make trouble. And now I'm all done and I'll gone to pieces and it doesn't work. Darling, it doesn't work at all. I don't care if I die, if it only will stop. Please, darling, please make it stop. There it comes. Oh. She breathed sobbingly into the mask. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Don't mind me, darling. Please don't cry. Don't mind me. I'm just gone all to pieces. You poor sweet, I love you so. I'll be good again. I'll be good this time. Can't they give me something? If they can only give me something, I'll make it work. I'll turn it all the way. Give it to me now, she said. I turned the dial all the way, and she breathed hard and deep, and her hand relaxed on the mask. I shut off the gas and lifted the mask. She came back from a long way away. That was lovely, darling. You're good to me. You be brave because I can't do that all the time. It might kill you, I said. I'm not brave anymore, darling. I'm all broken. They've broken me. I know it now. Everybody's that way, I said, but it's awful. They just keep it up until they break you, she said. In an hour, it'll be over, I said. Isn't that lovely, darling? I won't die, will I? No, I promise you won't, I said. Because I don't want to die and leave you. But I get so tired of it, and I feel like I'm going to die. Nonsense, I said. Everybody feels like that. Sometimes I know I'm going to die. You won't, you can't. But what if I should? I won't let you, I said. Give it to me quick, give it to me. And then afterward, I won't die. I won't let myself die. Of course you won't. You'll stay with me. Not to watch it. No, just to be there. Sure, I'll be there all the time. You're so good to me. Give it to me. Give me some more. It's not working. I turned the dial to 3, then 4. I wish the doctor would come back. I was afraid of the numbers above 2. And finally, a new doctor came in with 2 nurses, and they lifted Catherine onto a wheeled stretcher and started down the hall. The stretcher went rapidly down the hall and into the elevator where everyone had to crowd against the wall to make room, and then up and then open the door and out the elevator and down the hall on the rubber wheels to the operating room. I didn't recognize the doctor with his cap and mask on. There was another doctor and more nurses. They've got to give me something, Catherine said. They've got to give me something. Please, doctor, please give me enough to do some good. One of the doctors put the mask over her face, and I looked through the door, and I saw a bright amphitheater in the operating room. You go in the other door and sit up there, a nurse said. There were benches behind the rail that looked down on the white tables and the lights. I looked at Catherine. The mask was over her face, and she was quiet now. They wheeled the stretcher forward. I turned and walked down the hall. Two nurses were hurrying down to the entrance to the gallery. It's a cesarean, one said. They're going to do a cesarean. The other one laughed. We're just in time. Aren't we lucky? They went in the door that led to the gallery. Another nurse came along and she was hurrying too. You go right in there. Go right in, she said. I'm staying outside, I said. She hurried in. I walked up and down the hall. I was afraid to go in. I looked out the window. It was dark in the light from the window, and I could see it was raining. I went into the room at the far end of the hall, and I looked at the labels on the bottles in a glass case. Then I came out and stood in the empty hall, and I watched the door of the operating room. A doctor came out, followed by a nurse. He held something in his two hands that looked like a freshly skinned rabbit and hurried across the corridor with it and in through another door. And I went down to the door that he had gone into, and I found them in a room doing things to a newborn child. The doctor held him up for me to see. He held him by the heels and he slapped him. Is he all right? I asked. He's magnificent. He weighed 5 kilos. I had no feeling for him. He didn't seem to have anything to do with me. I felt no feeling of fatherhood. Note. Aren't you proud of your son? The nurse asked. They were washing him and wrapping him in something, and I saw the dark little face and dark hand, but I didn't see him move or I didn't hear him cry. And then the doctor was doing something to him again, and he looked upset. No, he nearly killed his mother. It isn't the little darling's fault. Didn't you want a boy? No, I said. The doctor was busy with him, and he held him up by the feet and slapped him. I didn't wait to see it. I went out into the hall. I could go in now and see, and I went in the door and a little way down the gallery, and the nurses who were sitting at the rail motioned for me to come down where they were, and I shook my head. I could see enough from where I was. I thought Catherine was dead. She looked dead. Her face was gray, and the part of it that I could see, down below under the light, the doctor was sewing up the great, long, forceps spread, thick-edged wound. Another doctor in a mask gave the anesthetic. Two nurses in masks handed things. It looked like a drawing of the Inquisition. I knew as I watched I could have watched it all, but I just was glad I hadn't. I do not think I could have watched them cut, but I watched the wound close into a high welted ridge with quick, skillful-looking stitches like a cobbler's, and I was glad. And when the wound was closed, I went into the hall and walked up and down again, and then the doctor came out. How is she? I asked. She's all right. Did you watch? He asked. He looked tired. I saw you sew up. The incision looked very long. You thought so? Yes. Will that scar flatten out? I asked. Oh, yeah. After a while, they brought out a wheeled stretcher and took it in very rapidly down the hall to the elevator. I went along beside it. Catherine was moaning. Downstairs, they put her in the bed in her room. I sat in the chair at the foot of the bed. There was a nurse in the room, and I got up and stood by the bed. It was dark in the room. Catherine put out her hand. Hello, darling, she said. Her voice was very weak and tired. Hello, you sweet. What sort of baby was it? Shh, don't talk, the nurse said. It was a boy, I said. He's long and wide and dark. Is he all right? She asked. Yes, I said. He's fine. The nurse looked at me strangely. I'm awfully tired, Catherine said, and I hurt like hell. Are you all right, darling? I'm fine. Don't talk, I said. You were lovely to me, oh, darling, I hurt dreadfully. What does he look like? He looks like a skinned rabbit with a puckered up old man's face. You must go out, the nurse said. Madame Henry must not talk. I'll be outside, I said. Go and get something to eat, she said. No, I'll be outside. I kissed Catherine, and she was very gray and weak and tired. May I speak to you? I said to the nurse. She came out in the hall. I walked a little way down the hall. What's the matter with the baby? I asked. Didn't you know? She said. No, I said. He was not alive. He was dead? They couldn't start him breathing. The cord was caught around his neck or something. So he's dead. Yes, she said, it's a shame. He was such a fine big boy. I thought that you knew. No, I said. You better go back in with Madame, he tells the nurse. I sat down in the chair in front of the table where there were nurses' reports hung on clips on the side and looked out the window. I could see nothing but the dark and the rain falling across the light from the windows. So that was it. The baby was dead. That was why the doctor looked so tired. But why had they acted the way they did in the room with him? They supposed they supposed that he would come around and start breathing probably. I had no religion, but I knew he ought to have been baptized. But what if he never breathed at all? He hadn't. He had never been alive, except in Catherine. I felt him kick there often enough, but I hadn't for a week, and maybe he was choked all that time. Poor kid. I wish the hell that I'd been choked like that. No, I didn't. But still, there would not be all this dying to go through. And now Catherine would die. That's what you did. You died. You didn't know it. You did not know what it was about. You never had time to learn. They threw you in and told you the rules. And the first time they caught you off base, they killed you. Or they killed you gratuitously, like Amio. Or they gave you syphilis, like Rinaldi. But they killed you in the end. You can count on that. Stay around, and they would kill you. Once in camp, I put a log on top of a fire, and it was full of ants. As it commenced to burn, the ants swarmed out and went first toward the center where the fire was, and then toward the back and ran toward the end. And when they were enough on the end, they fell off into the fire. Some got out, their bodies burnt and flattened, and went off not knowing where they were going. But most of them went toward the fire and then back toward the end and swarmed on the cool end, and then they finally fell off into the fire. I remember thinking at the time that it was the end of the world and a splendid chance to be a messiah and lift the log off the fire and throw it out where the ants could get off onto the ground. But I did not do anything but throw a tin cup of water on the log so that I would have the cup empty to put whiskey in it before I added water to it. I think the cup of water on the burning log only steamed the ants. There's an arrow here. This is very important. We'll go back to that. So now I sat in the hall and I waited to hear how Catherine was. The nurse did not come out. So after a while, I went to the door and opened it very softly and I looked in. I could not see at first because there was a bright light in the hall and it was dark in the room. And then I saw the nurse sitting by the bed and Catherine's head on a pillow, and she was all flat under the sheet. The nurse put her finger to her lips, then stood up and came to the door. How is she? I asked. She's all right, the nurse said. You should go and have your supper and then come back if you wish. I went down the hall and then down the stairs and out the door of the hospital and down the dark street in the rain to the cafe. It was brightly lit inside and there were many people at the tables, and I didn't see a place to sit, and a waiter came up to me and took my wet coat and hat and showed me a place at the table across from an elderly man who was drinking beer and reading the evening paper. I sat down and asked the waiter for a plateau du jour was. Veal stew, but it's finished, he said. What can I have to eat? Ham and eggs with cheese, or a cruchot? I had the cruchot this noon, I said. Well, that's true, he said. That's true. You ate the cruchot at noon. He was a middle-aged man with a bald top to his head and his hair slicked over it. He had a kind face. Well, what do you want, ham and eggs or eggs with cheese? Ham and eggs, I said, and beer. A demi-blonde? Yes, I said. I remembered, he said. You took a demi-blonde this noon. So I ate the ham and eggs and drank the beer. The ham and eggs were in a round dish, the ham underneath and the eggs on top. It was very hot, and the first mouthful I had to take a drink of beer to cool my mouth. I was hungry, and I asked the waiter for another order. I drank several glasses of beer. I wasn't thinking at all, but I read the paper of the man opposite me. It was about the break through the British front. Then he realized I was reading the back of his paper and he folded it over. I thought of asking the waiter for a paper, but I could not concentrate. It was hot in the cafe and the air was bad. Many of the people at the tables knew one another. There were several card games going on, and the waiters were very busy bringing drinks from the bar to the tables. Two men came in and couldn't find a place to sit. They stood opposite the table where I was. I ordered another beer. I was not ready to leave here. It was too soon to go back to the hospital. I tried not to think and to be perfectly calm. The men stood around, but no one was leaving, and so they went out. And I drank another beer. There was quite a pile of saucers now on the table in front of me, and the man opposite me had taken off his spectacles, put them away in a case, folded his paper, and put it in his pocket, and now sat holding his liquor glass and looking out into the room. Suddenly, I knew I had to get back. I called the waiter, paid the reckoning, and got on my coat, put on my hat, started out the door. I walked through the rain up to the hospital. Upstairs, I met the nurse coming down the hall. I just called you at the hotel, she said. Something dropped inside of me. What's wrong? Mrs. Henry has had a hemorrhage. Can I go in? No, not yet. The doctor's with her. Is it dangerous? I asked. It's very dangerous, she said. The nurse went into the room and shut the door. I sat outside in the hall. Everything was gone inside of me. I couldn't think. I could not think. I did not think. I knew that she was going to die, and I prayed that she would not. Don't let her die. Oh God, please don't let her die. I'll do anything for you if you don't let her die. Please, please, dear God, don't let her die. Dear God, don't let her die. Please, please, please don't let her die. God, please do not let her die. I'll do anything you say if you don't let her die. You took the baby, but don't let her die. That was all right, but don't let her die. Please, please, dear God, don't let her die. The nurse opened the door and motioned with her finger for me to come. I followed her into the room, and Catherine didn't look up when I came in. I went over to the side of the bed, and the doctor was standing by the bed on the opposite side. Catherine looked at me and smiled. I bent down over the bed, and I started to cry. Poor darling, Catherine said very softly. She looked gray. You're all right, Cat, I said. You're going to be all right. I'm going to die, she said. And then she waited and said, I hate it. I took her hand. Don't touch me, she said. I let go of her hand. She smiled. Poor darling. Touch me all you want. You'll be all right, Cat. I know you'll be all right. I meant to write you a letter to have if anything happened, but I didn't do it, she said. Do you want me to get a priest or anyone to come see you? I said. Just you, she said. And then a little later, I'm not afraid. I just hate it. You mustn't talk too much, the doctor said. All right, Catherine said. Do you want me to do anything, Cat? Can I get you anything? Catherine smiled. No. And then a little later, she said, you won't do our things with another girl or say the same things, will you? She asked. Never, I said. I want you to have girls, though. I don't want them, I said. You're talking too much, the doctor said. Mr. Henry must go out. He can come back later. You are not going to die. You must not be silly. All right, Catherine said. I'll come and stay with you nights. She said. It was very hard for her to talk. Please go out of the room, the doctor said. You cannot talk. Catherine winked at me, her face gray. I'll be right outside, I said. Don't worry, darling, Catherine said. I'm not a bit afraid. It's just a dirty trick. You dear, brave, sweet, I said. I waited outside in the hall. I waited a long time. The nurse came to the door and came over to me. I'm afraid Mrs. Henry is very ill, she said. I'm afraid for her. Is she dead? I asked. No, but she's unconscious, she said. It seemed she had one hemorrhage after another. They couldn't stop it. I went into the room and I stayed with Catherine until she died. She was unconscious all the time, and it didn't take long for her, very long, to die. Outside the room in the hall, I spoke to the doctor. Is there anything I can do tonight? No, there's nothing to do. Can I take you to your hotel? He said, no, thank you. I'm going to stay here for a while, I said. I know there's nothing to say. I cannot tell you. No, I said, there's nothing to say. Good night, he said. I cannot take you to your hotel? No, thank you, I said. It was the only thing to do, he said. The operation proved. I don't want to talk about it, I said. I would like to take you to your hotel, he said. No, thank you. He went down the hall, and I went to the door of the room. You can't come in now, one of the nurses said. Oh, yes, I can, I said. You can't come in yet. You get out, I said. The other one, too. But after I got them out and shut the door and turned off the light, it wasn't any good. It was like saying goodbye to a statue. And after a while, I went out, left the hospital, and walked back to the hotel in the rain. Powerful ending. Really powerful. We're going to analyze this and the entire novel in the final analysis of A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. Thanks for staying with me. And be careful.